NBA execs from around the league expected to be a very busy offseason around the NBA. But the question that many Bulls fans are asking, how involved are the Chicago Bulls going to be in that? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Plus, it's Saturday, so you know we got to dive into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Ter Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content. So, Tim Bontemps from ESPN said that executives believe that it will be a very active summer out on the trade market for this offseason. And, you know, it makes sense, right? When you look at the number of teams that kind of have situations going on, we've talked about Philly a lot around here. There are going to be a lot of teams that, be it Sacramento, teams that get are disappointed by the way that they exited. Could the Clippers be involved in that, especially with Paul George contract extension, things like that are going to be active. But the thing that is more important for us here is how active are the Chicago Bulls going to be in that, and are they going to be in a position to take any type of advantage in regards to into the activity out on the market. And that's where the Bulls are going to, have to answer themselves on some questions on exactly what they want to accomplish. And when you really look at it, is this, right? That we know that the Bulls kind of first priorities seems like to be moving Zach LaVine per what we've heard. And I think that's going to help sound and set a tone of what the rest of the changes are for Zach LaVine. The Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan situations are kind of the most pressing for the Chicago Bulls. And then kind of on the outskirt of that, of course, is what are you going to re-sign Patrick Williams for? Then outside of that, again, you're looking at Alex Caruso based on what happens in the Zach LaVine trade or DeMar DeRozan walking. What does that mean for the future of Alex Caruso? If you let Zach go via trade and let DeMar both walk, does that make it kind of increase your chances of moving Alex Caruso? Because keep in mind, in the back of all of this is the Chicago Bulls 2025 pick, right? And I know we haven't even made it through the 2024 draft, but the moves that the Bulls make in this offseason are really going to determine and dictate how likely is it that they keep their own pick in 2025. And the reason why you see a lot of things around that, and this is why you're going to see a lot of teams active as well in this offseason, is that the 2025 draft is set to be stacked. And it's going to be offered the next time for a lot of teams to get potentially a superstar level talent or a player that projects to maybe get to that superstar level via a rookie deal and to draft that player. And so you're going to see a lot of maneuvering for teams to maybe get themselves in the top 5, top 10 of that draft. And considering the Bulls' own draft pick in 2025 is top 10 protected, I really do think that, what happens around the Chicago Bulls in that trade market and how active they are this offseason, it really comes down to what do they want to do? Do they want to compete? Do they want to contend? Or do they want to try to find a way to maybe compete, stay competitive, but still hold on to that pick? Keep in mind, the way that this season went, if the Bulls would have just lost a couple of more games, they would have had a top 10 pick. They would have kept that pick. So that's where the Bulls really, I think, have to look at it and ask themselves, can they make enough moves this offseason and add enough talent via those moves to where it eliminates the talent that you can get in the 2025 draft? And I just don't think it is, right? And while a full rebuild isn't likely, look at Lonzo Ball's contract coming off the books next offseason as well. This is where it comes down to AK looking and, again, having another chance and opportunity to future project, right? To future project and put themselves in a situation where they can finally be ahead of the market. And I don't know if I have the faith in AK and Eversley to do that. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying this is that you open yourself up for the possibility of that. And maybe AK and he sees the world differently. Maybe it is that he feels that they can be competitive enough to where they're close enough to avoid the play-in next year. And then maybe they're saying, hey, top 10 pick, we're not really worried about that. I don't see that world happening. I could be wrong. I have been before. But I think that's what it comes down to. And the activity that we're going to see around is going to be a lot of posturing. It's going to be teams that are going to say, hey, we're not worried about the 2025. We want to stack talent around the veterans or whatever we have now. Who wants these first-round picks so we can get talent? In that case, the Bulls maybe could take advantage of that. Do they need an Alex Caruso? Are they willing to send out some picks, things like that? So it's going to be an interesting offseason to watch. And as the playoffs keep going on and teams get eliminated and back to the drawing board and take a look at things, it's going to be big to see, where the market could set, right, for everything, not just the Zach LaVine trade, but also which team could look to give DeMar DeRozan a lot of money, right? Because they look at DeMar and say, hey, we kind of want DeMar here. And if DeMar wants to come here and actually compete for a title and not just, compete for playing spots in Chicago, maybe we can falter a sign and trade or something like that. So it's going to be an interesting go of it. This year's draft, like I said, we're right after the draft lottery. We're going to start our draft coverage there. It comes down to that. And there's a trade that was floated out. I can't remember the outlet, but it was a trade with Zach LaVine that it was clearing some salary cap for the Chicago Bulls, but the Bulls getting back D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, and Jared Vanderbilt. I like those players in a sense, right? I have my thoughts on D'Angelo Russell and his fit next to Kobe White, but then again, maybe he's coming off the bench. You would start Ayo and Kobe at that point in time. Maybe there's something to be said of that. And that may be the level of type of deal that you're looking for Zach LaVine, right? And so, we'll see what it gets done. And, the Zach LaVine trade, I think, is going to be the first big domino of this offseason if it does go down and they can find a trade partner. But yeah, it's going to be a fun offseason. It's going to be a fun one to cover both here and over at NBA Central. So make sure you guys subscribe to both channels, as well as we'll be breaking down everything in the NBA in general over on NBA Central. But let me know what you guys think. Like, do you think that the Bulls can take advantage of the rumored activity around the NBA and find a way to get it? And do you also think, like I do, is it more important to contend, even though if you think the Bulls can truly get to contending, is it more important to compete? Or can you find a way to still be competitive enough, but where you are giving yourself a chance to hold on to that 2025 draft pick as well? Let me know all that down below. But it's Saturday. That means this episode is mainly built around your voicemails. This one's from the 773.
So, hey, good morning, bro. This is Brando from Offseason, man. I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking about all the ways that Bulls can really improve their roster, yet they will, under the cap, be competitive to really solve all of these issues. I'm taking pages out of the Chicago Sky's book, I'm taking pages out of the Chicago Bears book. You need to have multiple first-round picks in one draft, the same draft. That's how you get high-level talent. That's how you build for the future. And that's how you get good players for cheap. That's how you want to call it. So I'm thinking if we can trade LaVine to a team like, say, Detroit for their number one pick this year. So this is pretty much a down year in the draft. Maybe they're willing to part ways with it, especially if it's like a top 3 pick. Maybe if they don't get number one, say they get anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe they're more willing to part ways with that pick. Then you compare, say, a Rob Dillingham type player with the number 11 pick that we already have our own. Now you can draft maybe a Donovan Clingan or Philip Hussey or a Zach Edey or whoever. Now you bring in some more help and you got high-level talent and you got them all on rookie contracts. So should they take a page out of the Chicago Sky and Chicago Bears book? I think so, but let me know what you think. Peace.
So the Bulls aren't trying to stay under the salary cap. And I know you probably mean it, but I always like to, because there are some people who really don't understand the difference. The Bulls are always over the salary cap. They're beneath the luxury tax. Those are two different things. And so, I like what you laid out there as far as like learning from it. And I had an episode on that, I think last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, as far as what the Bulls can learn from the rebuilding of the Chicago Sky and the Chicago Bears. Now, I don't think you need multiple picks, especially the NBA draft is a little different than especially the NFL draft. And what the Chicago Sky were able to do is not commonplace, right? You don't typically get multiple picks in the first round. Now, if you can, great. But it's more about, to me, it's about getting your draft picks right over years, right? Like imagine had the Dalen Terry, Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, all the drafts that we had under AK, like let's even say 3 or 4 of those guys hit. So far, Ayo looks like the only true hit, not to knock Patrick Williams, but he has to be more consistent. If those had really been hits for you, and if they still turn into it, it gives you those cost-controlled contracts. So I think you have to hit on your picks over years, and then keep that. That's how you keep your salary cap down, is your own draft picks developing right and being a big part of your present and your future. And I think that's where you start running into those situations to where you can stay under that luxury tax, right? So I think that's the most important thing. I'm not going to say they necessarily have to have multiple picks in the same draft. It would be nice in a deeper draft. I don't think this is the draft you want to necessarily look to trade some of your important pieces just to have multiple picks in this draft. This is a weaker draft class. But if it is a stronger one, then yeah, that argument definitely can be made there, brother. So thank you for that voicemail. Let's get into the next one. This one's from my brother Corn.
Hey, what's the word, King? It's Corn. Let's get right into it, King. Okay, let's see. Now, moves that need to be made. I don't know. I really want to, cause like getting rid of all the vets is like, ain't that, because I want to talk about culture, you know, but then again, we say AC is valuable, and I feel like AC is a valuable part to bring in culture, but we don't have a culture. So how valuable is AC? When it comes to Vooch, regression. Trade, what we get back, I don't know. We're better off. I feel that way. Zach LaVine, that's right on the wall. Let's not get into that. DeMar is the case that gives me most pause. I like what he always do with the kids during the summer, teaching them how to be professional, right? I don't know with that. That's the one that gets me. Javon, you know, that's move that to the side. Torrey is interesting too. Might be Torrey is signed up, but it's like, if we do get rid of these vets, is it a way of saying that, okay, here y'all go? And I want to talk about culture again. What culture is Kobe and Ayo going to bring? What culture you think that can? I'm asking you, King. I'm asking you, Big Bro. What culture you think that Kobe and Ayo, if they do get the helm for a minute before we bring in that big star, what do you think? Because what Luol Deng and Kurt brung was defense, grit, and grind and heart. Is they going to do that, or is it going to be inconsistency? Because that's, you know, they're both kind of that. So, hey man, we'll see. Appreciate you like always, King. That's just a thought, man. I'm just sitting up here thinking about that, man. I just looked at your show today, so appreciate you, King. Blessings.
So I disagree with you as far as how important. I get where you're getting. It's a fair question, right? As far as like, well, if we don't have a culture, how important is Alex Caruso really to that culture? Fair question. I mean, fair, and that can be said about anybody, right? And the most important question that you asked there is at the end. What culture can Ayo and Kobe bring? And I think when you really talking about truly setting culture, it's not just the players, right? The players add to that. For example, I think Ayo and Kobe can add to it the work ethic in the offseason. How much these guys put in work to improve and round out their game in the offseason. Put in the work. But it's the really true culture on a team, a franchise's culture. It's true symmetry between the identity of your players, your front office, and your head coach, kind of all kind of being in line. Heat culture, think of that, right? For example, using heat culture, Jimmy Butler's been the same player as far as mindset, mentality, and how hard of a worker he is on every team. It didn't work. It worked briefly here on the Bulls when Tibbs was here, but then afterwards it didn't work. It didn't work in Minnesota. It didn't work in Philly. Now, reportedly, Philly is one of the teams reportedly looking to bring Jimmy Butler back if he hits free agency. But, like, you have to have it has to be an overall roster. You have to have the right players to embrace the culture. You have to have the right coach to instill that culture as well and support it, right, and hold the expectations. You have to have the right front office that brings and adds players that fit that culture as well, right? So I think that Kobe and Ayo can help establish the culture, but it's not just on them to just establish the culture either. It has to be a franchise or organizational thing. And that's why when you see people that like have issues with Billy Donovan, like, do you think Billy's one of those coaches that can really instill that culture? That's a question for each person to ask individually. I have my doubts on it, but so I think if anything, if we're looking at what Kobe and Ayo bring individually, as far as that, it's the work ethic, putting in that work, always trying to round out and improve, right? Having that right mindset, being dogs out there who sacrifice, go after it, and add things to their game. That's what they can bring. They don't necessarily have – Ayo has that defensive mentality for sure. Kobe White, who was leading the league in charges to start the season, right? He's been a very active defender here lately, but I think that it's more so that work ethic is the things that they can help instill here, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down below. All right, next voicemail is from Shay. Let's go ahead and get into that now.
What's up, this is Shay. You know, I had to use a different phone because some reason my phone is not connecting to call in to the voicemail box. But anyway, I just wanted to say about this whole Zach LaVine trade. I think that we should pay close attention to the New York Knicks versus the Philadelphia 76ers, because I believe that whichever team loses that series is the team that might look to add Zach LaVine to their team next year. And the reason why I say this is because when you look at both of those teams, they really don't have a second, more so the New York Knicks don't really have a second, or they need kind of a third option due to the fact that both of their big men, Julius Randle and Joel Embiid, tend to be injured a lot. And I think that Zach LaVine could be the answer to help him in the long run. And I think the fact that whether one of those teams win, whether one of those teams lose, I feel like that's going to play a big factor in which team Zach LaVine goes to. If the Bulls are looking to trade him and get very active this offseason. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, so much to think. Peace.
I don't necessarily think that the loser between the 76ers and the Knicks can look to add LaVine. I think both teams are going to be looking to add something. The 76ers, for example, have all the cap space they're going to be looking to add regardless. The Knicks are reportedly would love to add either Devin Booker or Donovan Mitchell. So I think they're going to both be looking to add. And that goes back to kind of the first opening segment in this. There are going to be a lot of teams looking to add things to kind of truly reach that championship level. So teams fizzling out and losing, it kind of excels that. But I think overall we're going to be in an offseason where a lot of teams and a lot of organizations are going to be looking to add talent. The question is, can the Bulls find the right value for them as well as the interest from those other teams in what they have to offer, Shay? But great voicemail there. I'm glad that you're able to leave a voicemail there again, but great points there. All right, let's get into this next voicemail. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. I just wanted to say that, of all the Bulls players that I think should be untouchable, I agree that it should be Io and Kobe, but I also think you should toss in Julian Phillips and Alex Caruso. And some people might say, why them? If you can't build your team around good young pieces, then the problem isn't with the players, it's with the front office. And why not move off from Caruso? I think it's because you need people who have fight in them. Like, we need those type of players who knows their job and goes out and gives 110% every night, almost to their detriment, because we keep seeing him getting hurt because he's giving everything he has. When you talk about players that Caruso should fall in to that same category of former Bulls players, we could talk about Todd Gibson, Bobby Porter, Andres Nocioni, Kirk Heinrich, maybe Joakim Noah, and then maybe you could toss in even Ronnie Brewer. Guys who weren't, most guys who weren't the most talented player on their team, but were crucial to winning. This is why you have teams offering 1 or 2 first-round picks for him, because they know what he gives you. And those are the players you don't trade. Those are players you give extensions to. I'd also like to see the Bulls keep Javonte Green and hold on to Dalen Terry if possible, simply because they're in the same vein as that. You can never have too many players who go all out and give all the just give effort night in, night out. We've seen teams who do that, and we've seen what happens when the Bulls go up against those teams. They usually end up beating the Bulls. So how many years have we saw OKC and Houston with lesser quality teams come out and just beat the Bulls by like 7 or 8 points by the end of the game? But my question to you is, when you look at teams who are considering blowing up their whole roster, teams like Phoenix, the Lakers, New Orleans, Atlanta, should the Bulls get involved? Should the Bulls offer a Zach LaVine? And as Billy Donovan does move up to the front office and Mark Anthony takes another spot, should the Bulls then consider keeping Zach LaVine? His biggest problem is Billy Donovan. What's your opinion on that? Thanks.
All right, I see where you're coming from with those players that you have marked there as untouchable. I definitely see that. Now, as far as your question on Zach LaVine, I think what we're hearing, what we're seeing, it all points to the Bulls don't plan on keeping Zach LaVine regardless. Now, that's via what we've heard. Could that change? But I don't think Billy Donovan moving to the front office, if Mark Eversley does, take another job or anything, it's going to change the Bulls' mindset. It seems like the front office is looking at between whether it's Zach LaVine, the contract, whether it's Zach LaVine, the player, whatever it is, that they're looking to move on from that and to see what they can add to their team as far as depth, flexibility under the luxury tax because of that. And so, that's kind of what the things that we're hearing are telling me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be what happens, but that's kind of what my feelings are from what I've heard, seen, read, things like that. So ultimately, we'll see. We'll see what this front office does, how much is truly moving Zach LaVine, the focus is of this front office. And if they end up taking a deal where it's looked at as like, hey, you really didn't really get much back for Zach, but maybe you get some protected. I don't know. Like, it's so much up in there. I talked about a deal earlier, right? The Gabe Vincent deal with Jared Vanderbilt and D'Angelo Russell. Like, is that a great deal for the Bulls? Are you looking at that? No, but Jared Vanderbilt is a damn good player, especially as a role player. D'Angelo Russell isn't going to pass up Kobe White. I don't think they're going to look to do anything like that, but he is a player that can bring some shooting, some scoring off the bench, especially if Ayo moves into that starting lineup, right? You need another guard off that bench. So there's some things in that, but I think we're looking at in that type of thing that the Bulls seem, at least so far, committed to moving Zach LaVine, regardless. And we'll see if that ends up changing, brother. But great voicemail, Reginald. Thank you for leaving that. Let's get into this next voicemail. The last one, this one's from Oscar.
Hey, just heard your episode talking about the Zach trade and how do we trust, as Bulls fans, do we trust AK's evaluation? And to be honest with you, it's really hard to. The Bulls were struggling with size, and a couple of seasons ago we were struggling with size, and we felt that the team needed to get bigger and to be able to compete with these teams in the East and in the NBA in general. And this guy doubles down by drafting back-to-back years the same players. Basically, he's in the three drafts he's had, he's drafted the same player 3 times and then drafted Ayo, which is probably the best out of the 4 he's drafted. P. Will, Dalen Terry, and the other kid last year, 3 6'6" to 6'8" wings that literally need help, need to get better in every aspect of basketball, dribbling, shooting. Like, it's repetitive. So how can I trust someone that continues to make the same mistake over and over and tries to overcorrect it? Like, I don't understand why he keeps drafting these wings that they don't have that don't have basketball skills. They're athletic, but not really a lot of basketball skills. But I don't know, man. We need to change the direction of this team.
Now, I mean, Oscar, you're making kind of broad comparisons. P. Will, Dalen, and Julian aren't the same player. Just because they have similar physical makeup and they all are raw, they're not the same player. Julian has basketball skills. He can pass, he can shoot, he can do those things. Now, we didn't get to see a whole hell of a lot of it, but those things are on display. He does have that. Patrick Williams was more of a project where you need to round out his things. And Dalen can pass also, especially in transition. It's in the half court where he goes things. So, again, like Oscar, when you pop up in the offseason, I love it when you pop up, but I think sometimes like you make broad comparisons, and I don't know how much you've actually watched these guys, and I don't mean that as a slight, but they're not similar. You can make similar cases to like Patrick Williams and Julian, but even Julian, when he was playing, Julian showed far advanced as far as like actual basketball skills. The one thing with Julian was his shooting, right? And those other things, the rebounding, the blocking shots, he really kind of brought that early on. He just didn't play a whole hell of a lot. Now, is that Billy doing that? Is it other things? But most players are going to be raw. And I think where you've seen the Bulls draft at second round with Julian, he's going to be raw. It's a second round player. Dalen Terry, yeah, there are other players around that. Walker Kessler was ready to go, right? And there is something to be said that AK has drafted all kind of these 3 and 4 players, right? 3 and 4s. And hopefully this season we see him draft something different. It's because we need a center, right? So I get it, and I understand completely the lack of trust in AK because that's earned as well. He's earned the lack of trust. I just don't agree with that they're all the same player just because they're raw. But, that's picking hairs, but nitpicking there. But yeah, AK does need to show that he can think outside the box, and he has to show that he can do that and hit. He needs to hit on this year's pick. And keep in mind, y'all, I know not everybody's going to hear this. Hitting on this year's pick doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be big impact players in year 1, but it means in long-term longevity they need to, and hopefully that they show and can bring something this year that we can use because we need it. We don't have a lot of room under the luxury tax. So your draft pick, you're going to need that player to be able to perform. And let's see what the Bulls do. This is to be their second highest pick since AK and Eversley took over. Let's see what they do. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See Red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.